Have you ever do everything right, be the dependable kid, show up when no one else does, help build the family legacy, only to get tossed aside the second the favorite child decides they want your spot? Yeah, welcome to my life, Reddit. I'm Nate, and this is the story of how my parents, Debbie and Steve, ditched me for my perfect little brother Liam, cut me out of their will and the family business I helped build, only to come crawling back when their golden boy ran everything into the ground. But by then, I wasn't picking up the pieces. I was too busy thriving without them. Let's rewind. Growing up, Liam was the classic golden child. You know the type, could trip over his shoelaces and Debbie would call it graceful. Meanwhile, I could bring home straight A's, and Steve would grunt something like, "Well, that's expected." But hey, I wasn't bitter, at least not at first. I figured if I worked hard enough, stayed reliable, and didn't rock the boat, they'd eventually see my value. So when I got older and they asked me to help run the family business, I thought, finally, my chance to prove myself. And prove myself I did. While Liam was off, finding himself, which meant partying on their dime and pretending to study business, I was grinding 60-hour weeks, keeping the company afloat, and making sure Debbie and Steve could brag at every family gathering about how both their sons were successful. Spoiler, only one of us was putting in the work. For years, I kept things running smoothly. No complaints. No drama. Just head down, doing what needed to be done. But then Liam decided he was ready to take over. And just like that, everything changed. Suddenly, all those years I'd dedicated to the business didn't matter. Debbie and Steve were blinded by the fantasy of their golden boy stepping up. Meetings got awkward. Decisions I used to make were now being reviewed by Liam, who, by the way, still thought profit margins were a type of yoga stretch. Then came the day they called me into the office. The same office I'd practically lived in for years. Steve looked me dead in the eye and said, "Nate, we think it's time you stepped back. Liam's got fresh ideas, and we want to give him room to lead." No, thank you. No acknowledgement. Just a polite way of saying, "You're out." And if that wasn't enough salt in the wound, a week later I found out they'd updated their will, cut me out completely. Everything was going to Liam. That's when I realized, being the good son doesn't mean anything when your parents only see value in the shiny, underqualified version of success they built up in their heads. But what they didn't realize was, I wasn't about to sit around feeling sorry for myself. While Liam was busy playing boss, I was about to show them what happens when the person you toss aside stops caring about your approval and starts building something better on his own. After Steve and Debbie dropped the whole "step back and let Liam lead" speech, I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't even ask why, because deep down, I already knew. This was never about business. It was about the image. About their fantasy of Liam being the prodigy son who'd carry the family legacy. So I stood up, shook Steve's hand, because hey, professionalism till the end, and walked out of that office with nothing but my dignity and a mental list of everything they were about to screw up without me. Most people expected me to be bitter. Friends kept asking, "Nate, aren't you mad? After everything you did for them?" But honestly, I wasn't mad, I was free. For the first time in years, I wasn't chained to a business where every win got credited to Liam's inspiration, and every problem landed on my desk. I took a week off, my first real break I'd had in forever. Cleared my head, reconnected with people who appreciated me, shout out to my grandparents for always seeing through Debbie's golden child obsession. And then I did what I do best, I built. I took the skills I'd spent years perfecting, the ones Debbie and Steve clearly didn't value, and I started my own company. Smaller, leaner, but built on my terms. No Liam. No family politics. No Debbie hovering over my shoulder asking if I could mentor her precious boy. It wasn't easy. Starting from scratch is never. But every late night, every risk, every client I landed felt like a personal win, not something I had to share credit for at a family dinner. Meanwhile, word started trickling in about how things were going back at the old company. Spoiler, exactly how I expected. Liam, with his fresh ideas, was running the place like it was his personal playground. He fired key staff because they weren't on board with his vision. Translation, they told him his ideas were stupid. He blew cash on flashy marketing campaigns that made 0 sense. And he tried to modernize operations by implementing systems he didn't even understand. Debbie and Steve? Oh, they defended him at first. He's just adjusting. Give him time, he's innovative. But innovation doesn't pay invoices when clients start walking away because the guy in charge can't tell the difference between revenue and profit. I stayed quiet. I wasn't about to be that guy gloating from the sidelines, yet. I focused on growing my own thing. Within a year, I was turning a solid profit, had a loyal team, and, here's the kicker, I even picked up a few former clients from my parents' company who were looking for more reliable management. Yeah, awkward. But I wasn't petty. I was professional. Still, I knew it was only a matter of time before the house of cards Liam built came crashing down, and that's when Debbie and Steve would realize they hadn't just pushed me out, they'd pushed out the only person keeping their dream alive. And oh boy, when that moment came, they weren't subtle about it. About a year and a half into running my own business, finally thriving, finally respected, I got the call I always knew was coming. First, it was a missed call from Debbie. Then another. Then Steve tried. By the fifth call, I figured someone either died, or, more likely, Liam's reign was collapsing. I let them sweat for a bit before finally answering. Debbie's voice was all sugar-coated panic. Nate! Oh, thank God, you've been so hard to reach. We've hit a rough patch. Rough patch was putting it mildly. Turns out, Liam's innovative leadership had driven the company straight into the ground. Major clients are gone. Debt is piling up. Staff are quitting left and right. Suppliers are refusing to deal with them. And now? Debbie and Steve were looking for their real son, the one who actually knew how to run a business. Debbie launched into this speech about families sticking together, and how we all make mistakes. Steve, ever the businessman, cut to the chase. We need you back, Nate. You're the only one who can fix this. Bro, I almost felt bad, almost. Here were the same parents who'd tossed me aside like last season's fashion trend, now acting like I was their last hope. I took a deep breath, enjoying the silence on my end of the line before delivering what might have been the most satisfying word I've ever spoken. No. Debbie gasped like I just announced I was disowning the family name, which, at this point, wasn't far off. Nate, don't be petty. This is serious. Think about the family legacy. Ah, yes, the legacy I was cut out of, remember? I reminded them, politely, that they made their choice. They handed the keys to Liam, updated the will, erased me from the picture, and told me to step back. Now they could live with that decision. Steve tried to pull the guilt card. We know we made mistakes, but this isn't just about us. It's about saving what you helped build. I laughed. No, Steve. What I built is doing just fine. You're talking about saving what Liam destroyed. That's not my problem. Debbie started to cry, you know, the performative kind where she still checks her reflection in the mirror. Please, Nate, do it for the family. But here's the thing, family doesn't throw you away the second someone shinier comes along. Family doesn't only call when they need a lifeline. So I told them, I've already got a family, my team, my clients, the people who respect me. You too? You're just people I shared DNA with. And with that I hung up. Sophie, yeah, my girlfriend who'd been cheering me on through this whole saga, popped her head in after hearing the tail end of the conversation. Was that the call? I nodded. Did you give them the answer they deserved? I grinned. Oh yeah? For the first time, I wasn't the fixer. I wasn't the fallback. I was just done. But Debbie and Steve weren't the type to accept defeat quietly. And Liam? Well, golden children don't like admitting they've failed, so they tried one last stunt to guilt me back into their sinking ship. After I shut down Debbie and Steve with that beautiful, soul-cleansing, no, I figured they'd finally get the message. But nah, entitled people don't quit when you set boundaries. They just get louder. A week later, I started getting texts from old family friends, distant relatives, even former coworkers. Stuff like, Hey Nate, I heard your parents are going through a tough time. Any chance you'll step in? It's sad to see the family business struggling. Thought you'd be the one to keep it afloat. Your mom's really worried, maybe give her a break? I was confused at first, until someone sent me a link. Debbie had done what any self-respecting manipulative parent would do when backed into a corner. She ran to Facebook. There it was, a long, dramatic post complete with a black and white photo of the company logo, paired with a caption that deserved an Oscar. It breaks our hearts to see decades of hard work facing challenges. We always believed in family unity, but sometimes, not everyone remembers where they come from. We still hope bridges can be rebuilt before it's too late. Bro, the passive-aggressive guilt trip was so thick I nearly choked reading it. Comments were flooded with sympathy. Stay strong, Debbie. Family always finds a way. Praying Nate does the right thing. Liam will pull through, you raised fighters. It was like watching a badly written soap opera, except I was cast as the villain without even showing up to set. Even Liam joined in, posting some nonsense about carrying the weight of expectations alone, and how some people turn their backs when things get hard. Classic. The golden child fumbling with the bag and still managing to play the victim. Sophie showed me the posts, expecting me to be furious. But honestly, I wasn't mad, I was amused. Because anyone who knew me, who saw the years I poured into that business, could read between the lines. And the people falling for Debbie's narrative? They didn't matter. Robert, yeah, Sophie's dad, who became my unofficial life coach through all this, gave me the best advice. You don't need to defend yourself to people who weren't there when you were putting in the work. Let them talk. Let them drown in their lies. So that's exactly what I did. No angry posts. No clapbacks. No setting the record straight. I just kept growing my own business, kept living my life, and watched from a distance as Debbie, Steve, and Liam tried to patch a sinking ship with Facebook likes and community sympathy. But here's the thing about public pity parties. They don't pay off debt. They don't bring back clients. And they don't make incompetence disappear. Within a month, rumors started swirling that the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. Okay, maybe a tiny smirk. Because this wasn't just karma. It was the inevitable outcome of choosing favoritism over competence, ego over loyalty. But Debbie and Steve weren't done yet. When public sympathy didn't save them, they went for the last card toxic families always play, the "we're still your parents" speech. And bro, when that email landed in my inbox, I knew they were officially desperate. A few days after Debbie's Facebook pity parade fizzled out and Liam's sad attempts at playing the victim got zero traction, I got the email. Subject line: Let's remember what matters, Nate. I already knew what was inside before I opened it, because when toxic parents run out of manipulation tactics, they always circle back to the same old script. We're still your parents. Family is forever. You'll regret this one day. And sure enough, Debbie didn't disappoint. The email was a masterpiece of emotional blackmail, wrapped in faux concern and sprinkled with just enough nostalgia to make it seem heartfelt. She opened with, Nate, no matter what's happened, you'll always be our son. Businesses rise and fall, but family is what truly lasts. Then came the guilt trip. We know we made mistakes, but cutting us off isn't the answer. Liam may have stumbled, but he's your brother. We need to come together, not turn our backs on each other. Steve chimed in at the end, dictated by Debbie, with a simple, it's time to come home and fix this, as a family. Bro, come home? Like I was off sulking in my room after missing curfew, not out here running a successful business while they watched theirs crumble. I sat there for a minute, staring at the screen, thinking about how old Nate would have reacted. The Nate who spent years trying to earn their approval. The Nate who thought being loyal meant tolerating being second best to Liam forever. The Nate who would have dropped everything just because they called. But that Nate was long gone. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing. Because once you stop craving validation from people who only see your worth when they're desperate, you realize how freeing indifference is. Sophie walked in, saw the email, and raised an eyebrow. You gonna reply? I shook my head, smiling. No point. They're not looking for a son, they're looking for a savior. And I wasn't in the business of saving people who dug their graves. Instead of replying, I archived the email and went back to what actually mattered, my life, my company, and the people who respected me without conditions. A week later, I heard through the grapevine, thanks to my ever-supportive grandparents, that Debbie and Steve's company had officially filed for bankruptcy. Liam? He'd already jumped ship, moved to another city with his wife Rachel, probably looking for the next set of parents to leech off of. Did I feel bad? Nope. Because at the end of the day, they didn't lose me when they cut me out of the will or pushed me out of the business. They lost me the moment they made it clear I was only valuable when they needed something. Robert summed it up best when we were having dinner that night. You don't owe anyone loyalty just because they share your last name. You owe loyalty to those who show up when you have nothing to offer but yourself. And that's exactly what I'd found, with Sophie, with my team, with the life I built without Debbie and Steve. But before I could fully move on, there was one last surprise, a letter from my grandparents that reminded me that sometimes, real family quietly watches everything, and knows exactly who deserves their trust. About a month after Debbie and Steve's business officially tanked, I thought that was it, the end of the saga. No more emails. No more calls. Liam had disappeared, Debbie stopped posting cryptic guilt trips online, and Steve probably went back to pretending emotions don't exist. I was fully focused on my life, business booming, Sophie and I planning a vacation, and finally breathing easy without family drama clogging up my days. Then, out of nowhere, I got a letter. Yeah, an actual letter, like it was 1995. The handwriting was familiar. It was from my grandparents. Now, they'd always been the quiet ones in the family. Never getting involved in Debbie's golden child games, never picking sides publicly. They'd check in on me occasionally, but I figured they were just trying to stay neutral to keep the peace. I opened the letter, expecting a gentle, "We hope you're doing well" message. What do I get instead? A complete curveball. Inside was a handwritten note that started with, "We've watched everything unfold, and we want you to know, we've always seen who you are, Nate." They went on to explain how proud they were of me for standing my ground, for building something on my own, and for not falling into Debbie and Steve's manipulative traps. But the real shocker was at the end. "When we're gone, everything we have is going to you. Not because of what you've done for us, but because you've proven you don't need it. That's exactly why you deserve it." Bro. I had to read that twice. These were people who never flaunted wealth, never made a big deal about inheritance or legacy. And here they were, telling me that while Debbie and Steve played favorites, they had quietly been watching, understanding, and waiting for the right moment to show where their trust really lay. It wasn't about money, that letter could have ended without that part, and it still would have meant the world to me. It was about finally being seen. Not as the backup son. Not as the fixer. But as someone who earned respect by simply refusing to settle for less. Sophie teared up when I read it to her. See? Not all family sucks. And she was right. That letter reminded me that sometimes, the loudest people in your life, the ones demanding loyalty and attention, are the ones who deserve it the least. It's the quiet supporters, the ones who never made me prove my worth, who truly had my back all along. I wrote back to my grandparents, thanking them, not for the inheritance, but for believing in me when no one else did. I also promised them that I'd continue building my path, not because I had something to prove anymore, but because I finally understood that success isn't about showing up to your family. It's about living in a way where their approval or lack of it doesn't define you. As for Debbie, Steve, and Liam, I never heard from them again. And honestly, that silence was worth more than anything they could have offered me. But before we wrap this up, there's one last piece of this story. A decision I made for myself that sealed the deal on leaving all that toxicity behind for good. So Reddit, that's how I went from being the reliable son my parents never appreciated, to the guy they begged to save them, only to realize I was already too far ahead to look back. After that letter from my grandparents, I made one final decision, not for Debbie, not for Steve, and not for Liam. I did it for myself. I booked a trip. No, not a dramatic, find yourself journey, just a well-earned vacation with Sophie. Somewhere sunny, with zero cell service and even less chance of running into anyone with my last name. Sitting on that beach, drink in hand, I realized something. I didn't feel like I'd won some battle against my parents. Because it was never a competition. The real victory? It was understood that I didn't need their approval, their business, or their inheritance to define my success. I built my own life, surrounded by people who didn't need to be reminded of my worth. Debbie and Steve's downfall wasn't satisfying because they failed. It was satisfying because I finally saw that their downfall had nothing to do with me. It was always going to happen when you prioritized ego and favoritism over loyalty and competence. And Liam? Well, golden children always land somewhere soft, for a while, at least. But I wasn't wasting energy thinking about where he'd end up next. I was too busy living a life free from the weight of trying to earn a place in a family that never valued me beyond what I could do for them. So here's my takeaway for anyone dealing with the same kind of toxic family dynamic. You don't have to stick around just because society tells you. Family is everything. If they treat you like you're disposable, prove to them that you are. Not because you're worthless, but because you're worth more than they ever realized. And now, Reddit, I'll leave you with this. What would you have done if your parents dropped you for the golden child, then came crawling back when it all collapsed? Would you save them, or let them face the consequences like I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I know a lot of you have been in that spot where family expects loyalty without ever giving respect. And remember, walking away isn't giving up, it's knowing when you're better off without the weight. Catch you in the next one, Reddit. Stay sharp, stay strong, and never be afraid to choose yourself over people who only call when they're sinking.